This is the Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 2nd chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour is not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord. So in 1970, the Canadian rock band, 5-man electrical band, first released their song, Signs. Written by lead vocalist Les Emerson, it was apparently inspired by a trip through California on Old Route 66, where billboards had become ubiquitous. And it wasn't just billboards. There were signs everywhere that cried out for your attention that you just couldn't escape. And so the refrain to the song, which almost everybody knows by now, says, "Sign, sign, everywhere a sign, blocking out the scenery, breaking my mind, do this, don't do that, can't you read the sign?" I can't sing it because then if we post this on YouTube, they're going to say that I'm violating copyright. Anyway, signs, they're everywhere. And over half a century later, they have become even bigger, brighter, and louder to attract attention in a world ever more full of signs. You can't miss them or escape them. But in today's gospel reading, John introduces the signs that Jesus does with his story of Jesus changing water into wine. But unlike the other signs that are all around us, the signs that Jesus does are not big, flashy, or ubiquitous. In fact, it's important to realize that John's gospel uses the word sign where other gospel writers use the word miracle. And usually, we expect a miracle to be a big, bright, and flashy thing. Something like those signs in the song, you just can't miss them or ignore them. But John's gospel wants to point out that the signs Jesus does are not for show. They're not neat parlor tricks to get attention, and often they are quite different from the signs that we see all around us. This first sign that Jesus does, the changing of water into wine at the wedding in Cana, is, like many of his signs, unnoticed by almost everybody. You know, Jesus' disciples see what happened, and the servants who draw the water know, but nobody else sees the sign. In fact, for most people, the party just goes on as before because there's still wine, and as far as they're concerned, there's nothing unusual at all to see here, and things just go on as normal. Nobody really notices. Like many of Jesus' signs, this sign causes disruption in the way things are supposed to work. The steward, basically the caterer, knows that there's now this really good wine, although he doesn't know where it comes from. And so he chews out the groom for letting this happen. This is not the way you serve wine at weddings. And as far as the steward is concerned, this just makes both him and the groom look totally incompetent. It messes up the way things are supposed to work. And this sign that Jesus does, like many of Jesus' signs, allows the party to go on. And this is ironically why a lot of people probably didn't notice. The wine had run out, everybody would have had to go home, but because of the sign, there was a way forward. The party went on, and only a few people appreciated why that was. And often, when we are looking for signs of God's presence in our lives, signs of God's presence, God's guidance, God's help, the signs that we ought to be looking for are much more like Jesus' signs than they are flashy billboards or pop-up ads. Often, Jesus' signs in our lives do not seem ubiquitous, but they're usually there if we're willing to look in the right places and pay attention. And that's not always an easy task. For us too, seeing and appreciating the signs of God's presence, help, and guidance in our lives often means being open to signs, which are ordinary things that many others don't see as coming from God. After all, the rest of the partygoers just saw wine as a natural thing around them. You know, we're at a wedding. There's supposed to be open bar with wine. And there is. They don't see anything unique. And, you know, the steward thought it came from the groom's wine cellar. He was just an idiot and left it sitting there until the end. Often, the sign of God's guidance and presence that I'm looking for may seem like just an ordinary thing in the world around me. It may seem like something that everybody sees and says, that's just a normal thing, and I go, wait a minute, maybe God is trying to tell me something through that thing, through that ordinary thing that I'm seeing or thinking about. This is actually always the way it was in the Old Testament with the prophets. The prophets are sitting around, and God says to them somehow in their mind or in their heart, hey, look over there, what do you see? And what the prophets see is usually a thing that everybody sees, but they don't see anything special about it. There's some guys building a wall, and they're using a plumb line. There's a bowl of fruit, and it's sort of rotted. There's a pregnant woman walking by on the street. And God says, yeah, that's the sign. That's something I'm using to tell you something. And it's an ordinary thing that everybody saw, but didn't see that as being connected to God. That's kind of the way the water into wine was for people at the party. It was a normal thing to most people, but some people who were paying attention in the right way saw that somehow God was doing something new in that moment. And sometimes the signs that we need to look for are the ordinary things like that that God may be using to show us something new. Sometimes looking for the signs in our lives also mean looking for the things that disrupt our routines and challenge our expectations. You know, perhaps part of the reason that the steward didn't ask where the wine came from. I mean, he didn't ask this, right, to anybody. He didn't ask because it didn't matter. It wasn't supposed to be like this. That's not the way things are supposed to work. And Jesus' signs usually cause disruption. And this is, you know, we talk about that, like how Amazon disrupted the retail business and things like that, things that disrupt ways things work in the world. We look at some of these signs sometimes and we go, oh yes, Jesus disrupts things for the bad people. But all the good people go, oh, this is great. But that's not always the way it is. The signs disrupt life for everybody. The signs disrupt life for the steward and the groom. I mean, they're good people. I mean, they invited Jesus to the party. These are not people that Jesus dislikes, but it made a disruption for them. Sometimes the signs make disruptions even for Jesus. The one sign in John's Gospel that is repeated other places is when Jesus feeds 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. It's great. But John's Gospel says what ends up happening is that the people want to come and make Jesus king, and Jesus himself has to physically run away up the hill and go hide out on the mountain for a while because people want to come and make him king. The sign that Jesus does disrupts Jesus' own life. But sometimes that's the way signs work. And the signs that I need to see are the signs that things are going to be different, but that God is guiding me through and into that different time and situation. Even though so often what I want in my life, and maybe you want in yours too, is a sign that everything can just go back to the way it was and be normal again. You know, I have been repeating that through 2 years of dealing with all the COVID nonsense right now, right? I just want everything to kind of be able to get normal and calm again. But maybe the signs that I need are the signs where Jesus is saying, this is disruptive, but this is the way forward. And that sometimes is the important thing about a sign. A sign, when Jesus gives it to us, is a sign that in spite of the disruption, and perhaps because of it, there is a way that the party can continue. This is also a key characteristic of all of Jesus' signs. They do upend expectations, but in so doing, they show a way forward that would not have been possible otherwise. And so the party continues, even though otherwise it would have had to end because they didn't plan for enough wine. People with incurable illnesses are healed, even though otherwise they would have had to continue living the way they were. And even the dead are raised to new life. The signs that God gives us are vehicles through which Jesus shows that there is a way forward and new life really is possible. But often, I know I resist looking for those signs because I really want the sign that everything is going to get calm and peaceful and normal in my life, and I'm not going to have to learn to live in this new way. And yet, signs, real signs, are more likely to show me that there is a way forward and that there is really new life. But like resurrection, it will be different than the way it was before. Seeing the signs of Jesus' presence and guidance is sometimes hard because they're not always obvious and they're not always bright and flashy. In fact, often they are not, and they're often not even things that we were looking for. But when we do recognize them, they turn out to be more significant than all the flashy stuff around us. Oh yeah, so I should tell you one other thing about that Signs song. When I was looking up the lyrics and for this sermon, I discovered a fun fact that I had not known before. When Five Man Electrical Band first released Signs in 1970, it was a B-side song, which for the youngins, we used to be albums. There was an A-side and there was a B-side, and the B-side was the bonus track material. It was the stuff that really wasn't important. What they really wanted you to listen to was the big hit single that they were going to release on the A-side. That A-side song was relatively unsuccessful. I've never heard of it. But Signs was so popular that it got re-released a year later as an A-side song, and it went gold. Many of God's signs are like that too. At first, nobody seems to think they should be noticed, just as few people notice the wine. But later on, if you knew what to look for, you could see the beginning of something great and something life-changing. In today's gospel reading, we read about the first of Jesus' signs, not the last. So be open to the continuing signs of Jesus' presence, help, and guidance in your life. Watch for the things that may not be flashy, but yet may be ways that God is showing you something that you need to see. Be open to the possibility that the things that disrupt your routine and your ideas about the way things should work may be God's way of showing you a new way forward. And be confident that even when you don't see a sign right now, and even when you're not sure whether something is a sign or not, God is still at work, guiding you and the whole world into the party of new life.